And in that quiet, terrifying moment, I promised myself I would survive this no matter the cost. The trial dragged on, each day heavier than the last, as my parents painted a story where I was greedy, selfish, and unworthy of the life I had worked tirelessly to create. I sat in the courtroom, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the table, listening to their rehearsed narratives, the lies seeping through every carefully chosen word. The judge's eyes flicked between us, but I could sense the doubt in the air, the silent question of whether blood ties should outweigh justice. Outside the courtroom, whispers followed me, neighbors, friends, distant relatives, all questioning, judging, assuming things I hadn't done. I felt the weight of isolation pressing down, yet beneath the fear and anger, something sharper grew, determination. I began documenting everything, receipts, messages, proof of my purchase, my hard-earned savings meticulously traced to each deposit. Late nights turned into relentless research, and each piece of evidence became a weapon in my silent rebellion. My mind sharpened, focused, fueled by betrayal and the urgent need to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Every sneer from my parents, every whispered doubt from onlookers, strengthened my resolve, carving a path through the storm. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for respect, dignity, and the principle that no one could steal the future I had built. And in those dark hours, I began to see the truth. Resilience could become a weapon sharper than any courtroom argument. I hired my own lawyer, a sharp woman named Miranda, whose presence alone gave me a sliver of hope in the suffocating courtroom. She studied every paper, every clause, every loophole my parents' side clung to, and slowly, methodically, began dismantling their case. The tension in the room grew palpable with every session. My parents' smug confidence began to crack, revealing glimpses of panic beneath their carefully constructed facades. I watched them squirm under pointed questions and undeniable evidence that proved my ownership of the house. Outside, I could feel the weight of public opinion shifting, as whispers of injustice turned into murmurs of support for the underdog standing her ground. Nights were long, and sleep became a fragile luxury as I prepared for the next court day, revisiting every detail, anticipating every attack. But amidst the chaos, a curious clarity emerged. I realized my parents' anger was never about the house. It was about control, about keeping me tethered to a life defined by their rules. And in that revelation, a strange calm settled over me, a quiet fire igniting. I would not bend, I would not break, and I would not allow their toxic definition of family to dictate my life. The house symbolized more than bricks and walls. It was the embodiment of my independence, my strength, and my refusal to be silenced. Each day, each confrontation, each accusation only fueled my determination to claim what was mine. The courtroom became a battleground of wills, my parents' words sharp as knives, my lawyer's rebuttals precise and unwavering. Every claim they made felt personal, a calculated attempt to humiliate me and strip away the autonomy I had fought for. I could feel the tension like static in the air, a storm waiting to break. Witnesses were called, some sympathetic, some loyal to my parents, each testimony a thread in a web of manipulation and deceit. I listened carefully, taking mental notes, noting contradictions, inconsistencies, every subtle hint of exaggeration. Outside, my sister's silence haunted me. She neither defended me nor spoke for herself, an ambiguous presence that added layers of uncertainty to the case. But instead of weakening me, this ambiguity sharpened my focus. I could no longer rely on family to act with fairness, and I realized that my strength had to come from within. Late into the night, I pored over financial records, tracing every penny, every payment, proving beyond doubt that the house was purchased with my own labor and sacrifice. With each discovery, a surge of triumph electrified my veins. I began to see the threads of a larger story. This was not just a dispute over property. It was a confrontation with the toxic legacy of entitlement, manipulation, and deceit that had silently governed my family for years. And in that realization, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and exhilaration. Readying myself for the final confrontation that would decide not just the house, but my entire sense of self. The day of the final hearing arrived, and the courtroom was thick with anticipation. My parents' faces were masks of confidence, but I sensed the tremor beneath their composure. I walked in, head held high, clutching my folder of evidence like a shield. every step echoing the years of struggle that had led me here. Miranda whispered a few last instructions, her calm confidence seeping into me like a lifeline. As the judge called the session to order, I felt the weight of the past, the injustices, and the relentless manipulations that had brought us here. My parents' lawyer launched into a rehearsed tirade, attempting one last time to undermine me, painting me as greedy, reckless, unworthy. I held my ground, heart racing, voice steady as Miranda presented my evidence, bank statements, contracts, communications, all irrefutable proof of my rightful ownership. The tension was unbearable. A taut wire stretched to its limit, every glance, every word amplified into a battle for justice. And then as the judge leaned forward, reading through the meticulously compiled proof, I felt the room shift. The atmosphere of intimidation, of betrayal, began to crumble, replaced by the undeniable weight of truth. My parents' smirks faltered, their whispered reassurances to each other dissolving into anxiety. For the first time, I sensed that victory was within reach, not just for the house, but for my sense of autonomy and the silent reclamation of my dignity. The judge paused, scanning the documents, then looked directly at my parents, his gaze unwavering and commanding. The room held its breath as he asked questions that my parents struggled to answer. Each hesitation, each contradiction, further unraveling their carefully constructed narrative. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and disbelief. I had prepared for this battle, but seeing the cracks appear in real time was almost surreal. Miranda's voice was firm, relentless, guiding the court through the evidence, leaving no room for misinterpretation or deceit. My parents' anger simmered beneath the surface, their once confident posture now edged with desperation. Every second stretched, the tension thick as a storm cloud ready to burst, and I felt the culmination of years of sacrifice, struggle, and determination converging into this single moment. My sister remained silent, her eyes flicking between us, a quiet acknowledgement of the chaos they had orchestrated. I realized then that this battle was bigger than a house. It was a confrontation with control, manipulation, and the toxic legacy of a family that valued entitlement over justice. And in that realization, my resolve hardened. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I had become a force, a testament to resilience, strength, and the relentless pursuit of truth. The storm around me raged, but inside, a quiet certainty took hold. I would not be broken. As the hours dragged on, I watched my parents' confidence erode with every carefully presented fact. The courtroom, once a stage for their intimidation, became a theater of revelation, exposing years of manipulation and entitlement. Witness after witness testified, some reluctantly, others firmly supporting my claim. Each story a thread unraveling the web my parents had spun. I felt a strange mixture of triumph and sorrow. Triumph for the truth emerging, sorrow for the family I thought I knew, now revealed as something almost unrecognizable. Miranda's cross-examinations were surgical, slicing through falsehoods with precision, exposing contradictions that left my parents scrambling for answers. I could see the fear creeping into their eyes, the realization that their scheme was collapsing under the weight of undeniable evidence. Outside the courtroom, news of the dispute had begun to circulate, whispers turning into murmurs of support for the daughter standing up to injustice. With every pointed question, every irrefutable piece of proof, the scales began to tip in my favor. I felt a surge of empowerment unlike anything before. I had stepped into the arena as a victim, but with each revelation, each declaration of truth, I was emerging as a warrior, armed not with weapons, but with resilience, intelligence, and unwavering determination to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The final day of arguments arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was almost unbearable. My parents' last-ditch attempts to sway the judge were feeble, their voices tinged with frustration and disbelief, as each claim was dismantled with precision. I sat quietly, feeling the pulse of adrenaline and fear, yet also a strange calm, a sense of inevitability that truth would prevail. Miranda presented the closing argument with unwavering clarity, painting a picture of dedication, sacrifice, and resilience, contrasting sharply with my parents' selfishness and entitlement. Every eye in the room seemed to focus on me, and I felt the weight of their expectations, their judgments, and their silent hopes. My sister's gaze met mine briefly, a flicker of emotion I couldn't quite read. But it didn't matter. I had to stand on my own, not relying on anyone else to validate my right to this life. As the judge leaned back, taking a moment that felt like an eternity, I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the culmination of years of struggle, betrayal, and silent perseverance. The story of a young woman fighting for justice against her own family's greed and manipulation was reaching its climax. And every second, every word, every glance in that courtroom mattered. And as I waited, I realized I had already won something far greater than a house. I had reclaimed my dignity, my strength, and my voice. Finally, the judge began to speak, his voice steady, deliberate, and filled with authority. He recounted the evidence, the meticulous records, the contradictions, and the undeniable proof of my ownership. I felt each word resonate through me, a mixture of relief, vindication, and a long-awaited sense of justice. My parents shifted uncomfortably, their faces tight with tension, as the truth they had tried to bury so carefully was laid bare. I sat upright, chest swelling with a quiet pride I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Miranda's eyes met mine, a subtle nod, acknowledging the relentless hours of preparation, the research, and the courage it had taken to stand alone against manipulation. The courtroom seemed to exhale with me, as if even the walls recognized the victory of truth over deceit. Every sneer, every whisper of doubt that had followed me here was eclipsed by the undeniable clarity of justice. I realized in that moment that the house, while symbolic of my independence, was only part of the triumph. The greater victory was reclaiming my agency, my sense of self, and my refusal to be defined by entitlement or betrayal. I had transformed from a cautious, trusting daughter into a woman fortified by resilience, ready to face the world armed with the knowledge that strength and integrity would always prevail over manipulation and greed. The verdict was announced, and the words struck me like a thunderclap. The house was mine, fully and indisputably, purchased with my own resources, and my parents' claims were dismissed. A wave of relief and disbelief washed over me, mingling with an unexpected surge of triumph. I had fought not just for property, but for my dignity, my voice, and my right to define my own life. My parents' faces fell, their silence heavier than any argument they could have made. And for the first time, I saw the stark reality of their manipulations laid bare. The courtroom seemed to hum with the gravity of the moment. Strangers whispered, witnesses smiled, and even my sister looked at me with a complex mix of admiration and unease. I realized the house represented far more than bricks and walls. It symbolized resilience, the power to reclaim one's life from betrayal, and the triumph of truth over deception. In the quiet aftermath, I felt an inner transformation, a strength that had been forged in the fires of adversity. I had emerged from the chaos not just victorious, but changed, aware that my life was mine to shape, unbound by the toxic chains of family entitlement, and ready to face whatever storms might come with courage and clarity. As I walked out of the courtroom, keys to my house clutched tightly in my hand, a strange sense of freedom washed over me, mingled with the echoes of betrayal and the lessons learned in their shadows. My parents' silence trailed behind me like a fading storm, powerless against the truth I now carried like armor. Each step toward my home felt like a reclaiming of years stolen by manipulation, entitlement, and hidden agendas, a journey from victim to survivor, from cautious daughter to unshakable woman. Inside, the walls of my new home welcomed me not just as a structure, but as a testament to perseverance, resilience, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. I allowed myself a quiet smile, knowing that while the scars of betrayal remained, they were now badges of strength rather than chains of despair. This house was more than a dwelling. It was a declaration that no one could define my worth, control my future, or silence my voice. And as I looked out the window, the city sprawling beneath me, I felt the power of survival, resilience, and the hard-won triumph of truth. My story, once shadowed by manipulation and family betrayal, had transformed into a saga of empowerment and justice. If you've ever faced impossible odds, felt trapped by deceit, or fought to reclaim your life, watch how I turn betrayal into strength. And remember, like, subscribe, and join me as I continue my journey into resilience, courage, and unstoppable determination.